One day in college, the teacher had stapled answer sheets to the back of every test by mistake. A few minutes after passing the tests around, his phone rang and he stepped out. Everyone had noticed the answer sheet, and we decided that we would all use it and tear it off after. Hopefully, he would never notice. So, I checked each of the answers, and they were indeed correct, except for the last one where we were to draw a flowchart for a process. I checked the answer sheet, which just said, "Answers will vary." So I drew my flowchart, tore off the answer sheet, and walked to the front podium to turn the test in. When I got up there, my curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what everyone else had drawn for their flowcharts. Well, they hadn't drawn anything, but had written, "Answers will vary." Yep, everyone had actually written this statement on their tests. Idiots. I don't even remember what the teacher did about it. In high school, me and a small group of friends would often frequent the McDonald's that wasn't too far from our school, whenever we could afford it, of course. Because what high schooler doesn't prefer McDonald's over cafeteria food? Well, on this particular Mickey D's visit, there was a kid throwing a major tantrum a few booths down from where we were sitting. After about 5 minutes of intense screaming, crying, and even gagging from the intensity of the screaming and crying, one of my friends finally exclaimed, "Oh, for fuck's sake, someone just give the kid a Happy Meal already." Just as he said this, an elderly man who was walking by our table stopped and turned back to look at us. We all assumed my friend was about to get a lecture on using curse words. But instead, the guy just gave a total deadpan look while saying, "Fuck, I'll even pay for it." We couldn't stop laughing for a solid 3 minutes. One day back in high school, I was sitting in the outside eating area enjoying my lunch, when suddenly this guy burst through the door, quickly followed by our on-campus officer carrying a taser. I have no clue why, but this idiot decided that his best chance at getting away from the officer was to climb a tree. So, he starts climbing, and as soon as he's about 10 feet up, the officer points up and shoots him with the taser, causing him to shriek, but with his muscles convulsing from the taser, he sounded like Elmer Fudd riding a washing machine spin cycle. He then proceeds to fall down the tree, smacking several branches on his way down before finally hitting the ground, where he was then detained by the officer. Everyone was laughing as he was being led inside. It was probably the most random thing I've ever seen happen. Oh, and when he was being taken back into the school by the officer, it was obvious that he had pooped his pants. My elementary school was a relatively new building, only about 3 years old by the time I started kindergarten. Each classroom came with a sink equipped with a water fountain so that students didn't have to leave the room to get a drink, which was great, except that the sink was too high up for most of the kids to even reach. My second grade teacher got around this problem by bringing in a small stool that we could use, although me, being one of the shortest kids in the class, still couldn't reach it. Unfortunately, the teacher wouldn't let me leave the room to get a drink from the regular fountain out in the hall, because that meant she would have to supervise me, which she couldn't really do with a class full of kids. So I had to either figure out how to reach the classroom fountain or suffer with thirst until recess. Naturally, I continued to try to reach the fountain, hoping for that one magical day where I would have suddenly grown another 3 inches. It never came, of course. But one day the teacher was forced to duck out of the class to deal with a fight that broke out in the hallway. I stupidly thought that maybe I could use this perfect opportunity to jump up on the counter and drink from the fountain like some sort of wild girl heathen. Thinking I was so clever, I grabbed onto the fountain nozzle for leverage and yanked myself up. I didn't get far. The nozzle twisted under the force. Being a new school, some things just weren't built up to code yet. I fell back off the stool, heard a weird hissing noise from inside the cabinet under the sink, and scurried back to my desk as my teacher re-entered the room. My fellow students gave me weird looks, but nobody said anything. Class continued as normal until my teacher finally heard the hissing noise. Annoyed, she marched over to the cabinet, hunkered down on her knees, and pulled open the cabinet doors. While the fountain obviously hadn't been built up to code, the sealant on its cabinet doors was top-notch, because it didn't let a single drop of that glorious wave leak out until she opened those doors. Not only did she get completely soaked, but she got an added bonus of a dead mouse sailing out right onto her lap. She screamed bloody murder and made us evacuate the room. Stat. I had never seen a grown woman cry before that day. One of my classmates ratted me out for the fiasco, and the teacher tried to convince the principal that I had carefully planned the whole thing. Mouse and all! The principal couldn't stop cracking up at the fact that a 6-year-old broke a fountain single-handedly long enough to really listen. I got 1 day of detention, and the principal informed my teacher that she had to start letting her students use the hall fountain from now on if they needed to. People called me Flood Kid for a while after that, but it was worth it.